Good afternoon. This is always one of the most exciting days of the year where we get an opportunity to introduce 26 new people officially into our program. Some of them have already been enrolled, but today we get to talk about them a little bit. And I think I would be remiss if I didn't start by thanking Tark Ahmad, our Director of Recruiting, Kevin Caldwell, our Assistant Director, Drew Robinson, and really all the recruiting staff who do such a great job throughout the year, because there really are no days off in recruiting. You know, now we cycle on until the next recruiting class. But today's the day to talk about this group, 26 players, 11 on offense, 14 on defense, a critical player in the special teams. As a long snapper we have as well, 8 players from the state of New Jersey, 7 players from Florida, 2 from Pennsylvania, 3 from New York, and 6 players from non-traditional areas. So with that, I would open it up for questions.
In general terms, there's been a lot of already outside criticism about the class and the decommits. How do you address that? I
don't know that I would address it at all, but I would say this. The last 14 months have created a lot of challenges for us here at our university, and we've come through those now. And these 26 players that are committed to play in our program believe in our program and believe in this university. And now we get to go forward as a family and turn the page for the first time, looking towards the 2014 season, our inaugural season in the Big Ten, and really move on to the next chapter of Rutgers football. So we've got some new coaches already in place. We've got 26 new players now in place. For me, everything is about looking forward.
Could you talk about, you mentioned the non-traditional recruiting areas. You have 5 of these players are from Big Ten country, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Minnesota, and how you were able to balance that with keeping this almost like any other Greg Schiano class and the emphasis on New Jersey and Florida.
I think recruiting always begins with the state of Rutgers, and the state of Rutgers always begins in New Jersey. And there's some really fine football players. You know, the defensive player of the year in our state, Sidney Gopri from Weequahic High School, is a tremendous playmaker on defense. We've got some defensive linemen, you know, from the state of New Jersey that have joined this class. Eric Waif, who's already enrolled from Egg Harbor Township. Kevin Wilkins, the #1 heavyweight wrestler in our state, is going to be an excellent defensive tackle. Donald Bedell from Rumson Fairhaven, and Jimmy Hogan from Ramapo, you know, defensive end bodies. I think somebody earlier in the day asked me what was one of the goals of this class, and I think in college, when you're recruiting a class that's this big, it's going to have a little bit of everything, but certainly we were not naive to the fact that we felt we needed linemen. We needed to build depth up front on both sides of the ball, and the opportunity to sign 6 defensive linemen and 4 offensive linemen, I feel like we've done that, and quite a few of them from New Jersey. And Florida's always been a good area for us. There's no doubt. You know, a guy like Josh Hicks, as a running back from Palmetto High School, I would put his film against anybody's in the country. And I think he's an elite level player and somebody that can have an immediate impact on our program. But your question was a little bit more about the non-traditional areas and supplementing. And I think that has probably the biggest impact that the Big Ten has had on us in recruiting. I think it's given us access to other areas and given us openings where there's going to be some players every year from our non-traditional areas that want to be a part of a great university like Rutgers and want to be a part of a great conference like the Big Ten and have an opportunity to play for Big Ten championships.
Coach, when a kid does give you a verbal commitment, what does that mean to you?
Oh, I don't think there's any gray area in the definition of the word commitment. I think what has happened in college athletics right now is in recruiting, we have a flawed system. And there's some really good people like Mac Brown who are leading the charge to try to rectify that situation. But you know, when you live in a world where you hear words like soft commitment, I don't really know what that means. Or, on the other side of it, words like committable offer. I don't really know what that means. And I think we've put these young people in a very difficult position. And I think at times we put the coaches in a difficult position. So when you ask me what the word commitment means commitment. It means that I'm committed to you and you're committed to me. When players commit and then they decide to look at other places, I think what happens is it forces the schools to look at other places. And I think the story's been kind of relayed incorrectly, and I haven't really spoke on it. But people said, did you pull a scholarship offer? I didn't pull any scholarship offers. When a player commits to us, we take a scholarship and we put it aside. When that player decides to visit other places, well, then we have to look at other players. So at that point, it's back in play.
So it's fair to you to say, hey, listen, if you're going to go look elsewhere, we got to look elsewhere too. That's a conversation that you'll have with a recruit.
Absolutely, and I don't know how it could work any other way. And as I've told many a recruit, when you get someday when you get engaged to who may be your future wife, if you give her a ring and you say that, hey, listen, I would love to marry you in a year, but don't worry, I'm just going to date a few other girls along the way, I'm not so sure that would go over so well.
That's not okay?
Well, again, it wasn't how I went about it, but if you want to try it, feel free.
Just last question. When you're dealing with the kids, do they lean on this excuse? Do you think that, this is a huge decision, obviously, for a kid. It can make or break their life on and off the field. So is that always sort of the fallback? Well, look, I just want to be sure. Is that part of – is there ever a way to fix something like that, the uncertainty in a decision like this?
I think there's a lot of conversations that happen, and I've heard a lot of things over the years. And what I've said to every player before they've committed is I said, hey, unless you are sure, don't commit. Somebody like Josh Hicks has been committed to us for 2 years. 2 years. But he was committed. He felt like this was the right place for him, and he never wavered. Somebody like Batim Bujari, already in our program, was very similar, a very early commitment. And we've had other players in our program that committed really towards the end of the recruiting process, guys like Darius Hamilton and Savon Huggins, who did take multiple visits. So I think the only way to get it right is to ultimately really be sure. But from a functional standpoint, this is my own personal belief, that really the only way that you would kind of clean it up a little bit would be to have an early signing period the way basketball does. But we don't have that right now.
Kyle, you leaned fairly heavily, I guess, on true freshmen last year. Can you tell yet how many from this class might be able to contribute immediately? Not necessarily looking for specific names, but in general numbers?
It'd be tough for me to give numbers, but I would say this. The 6 players who have enrolled early, 5 of them will be eligible to play next year. And I would say that they would have an advantage. And I think they're one of the strengths of this recruiting class as well. To have 5 players that have enrolled in early, a guy like Marcus Applefield on the offensive line, an area where we absolutely need to build depth, a guy like Eric Waif on the defensive line, a guy like Cam Lott in the secondary. They're going to have the opportunity, I think, to help us right away. Certainly Alan Lucy, our long snapper from the state of Virginia. We have scholarshiped him in anticipation of him coming here and helping us early. Now he's going to have to earn that job.
Kyle, when you look at the receiver position, what are your thoughts on not bringing one in, or could some of these athletes that you have signed end up at receiver?
I think they could. And the other thing I guess I would add to that is T.J. Johnson is going to play wide receiver this spring, so we've moved him to offense. I think that'll add another athlete for us over there, another long body who can run and catch. And I think a guy like Dre Boggs is somebody certainly who could play on both sides of the ball. And when you watch his highlight film, it's pretty spectacular.
Oh, Kyle, you were talking about kind of the, I guess, the many problems involved with the whole recruiting process in terms of commits and all that stuff. Aside from an earlier signing day period, is there any benefit to maybe not taking commits as early if you know that players haven't had a chance to go on official visits yet, or if they haven't had a chance to see anything other than your school? I mean, in-state players usually don't have that opportunity until during their senior season. I mean, it creates a perception problem if they decommit, and also it seems like they don't have the full opportunity to see things for themselves either.
I think that you said the problem. I don't see, when you ask me the question about the recruiting process, I can tell you what the issues are. I don't necessarily see them as problems. That's really what the process is right now. It is what it is until the rules change. We go through a lot of checkpoints before we take a commitment from a player. And when a player says that they want to commit, I take them at their word, unless they give me a reason not to. And if they gave me a reason not to, I probably wouldn't take their commitment at that point. But I don't know if there's a correct answer to that. I do know, and I'm not saying that I know that an early signing period is the answer to it. I just know that it would clean it up.
Kyle, you've said before that the STAR system for rating is imperfect. What does this class or members of this class have that the STAR system doesn't necessarily measure?
Well, someone would have to tell me how the STAR system measures for me to answer that question. I don't know that.